It is 10:01. Good morning. I'm Lucas Panzica from the 104.5 The Zone Studios. College baseball regionals are set as the NCAA postseason gets underway this weekend. Tennessee is the number one overall seed after beating LSU 4-3 in the SEC championship game on Sunday. The Vols will host Southern Miss, Indiana, and Northern Kentucky in the Knoxville Regional beginning on Friday. Vanderbilt is headed to the Clemson Regional. They'll take on Clemson, Coastal Carolina, and High Point. Also on Sunday, Nashville native Joseph Newgarden won the Indy 500 for the second straight year. Newgarden is only the sixth driver in IndyCar history to win the race in back-to-back years. NBA playoffs, the Boston Celtics are in the NBA Finals, winning the Eastern Conference and completing the sweep of the Indiana Pacers with a 105-102 win Monday night. And in the NHL, the Dallas Stars took a 2-1 series lead in the Western Conference Finals with a 5-3 win over the Edmonton Oilers. For all your foundation repairs and waterproofing needs, visit USSTN.com. Breaking news at once on your home for the Titans and Vols. This is 104.5 The Zone.
Good morning. Welcome into 104.5 The Zone. Hope your long weekend was excellent. It's lovely to have you guys back. We're here with you until 1 o'clock. The whole crew's here. 615-737-1045 is the number if you want to join the discussion. The F&M Bank Chat on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch at your disposal as well. Second time in program history, the Tennessee Volunteers are the number one national seed in the NCAA tournament. Big results over the weekend in the SEC tournament down in Hoover. Vengeance against the Vanderbilt Commodores, which Lucas was taking a little bit of satisfaction in last night. I won't betray any confidences here, but there was a little bit of tone.
I said on Friday that, okay, after the first game, the whole thing from Tennessee fans was, well, this one didn't matter. It was a midweek staff. For Vandy fans, that was just coping. I think both sides had some good points, but there was a rematch, a semifinal rematch for a berth in the SEC championship game. So I said whoever wins that game should get the ultimate bragging rights for this baseball season, and obviously Tennessee wins.
So postseason begins in Knoxville. The Knoxville Regional will take place, as Lucas said. You've got my Indiana Hoosiers in Knoxville, Southern Miss, Northern Kentucky as the 4 seed there. This is the 8th NCAA regional that Tennessee has hosted in its program history, and it's third in 4 years. In fact, the SEC with number 1, Vol baseball, number 2, Kentucky, and number 3, Aggie baseball. It's the first time in NCAA baseball tournament history that the top 3 seeds are all from one conference.
All those teams were in the losers bracket of the SEC tournament after the first day.
So strategy, coming into play throughout the course of the weekend there, and Tennessee ultimately goes on to advance and to secure that number 1 overall seed and looks to continue home dominance that we'll talk about here in just a little bit. We also have a little bit of news. Is this laser light show? Did we determine a crappy breaking news sounder? Because I feel like this qualifies as crappy breaking news, not actual breaking news. Do we have anything back there? No, that's my reckless speculation sound.
That's reckless speculation. We'll come up with something like a dong sound or something.
No, I don't want that either. Good morning, Jackson.
Morning, bud. Have a good weekend.
Yeah, weekend was great. Weekend was excellent. Memorial Day, one of those that always feels, even if you stay in one place, even if you just take the long weekend at home, maybe you get out on a boat, some beautiful weather yesterday at Percy Priest. We went out there for a little bit, maybe have a cookout. It's always one that feels like you went on a vacation, even if you didn't go anywhere. Memorial Day weekend. So great weekend for everybody, and I hope you guys had the same.
Chad Casual on the F&M Bank chat says the laser light show with a kazoo should be the crappy breaking news sounder, and I agree with that. Jackson?
I'm in. I don't have a kazoo. If somebody was willing to facilitate a kazoo, I would do it.
Well, I know who is willing to facilitate the kazoo. I just don't want more of him seeping into what we do around here. I've been actively working to get Bert off this radio show for the better part of it. Feels like 2 years now, and somehow it keeps seeping back in.
What's the news?
So, Tom Pelissero of the NFL Network gaslights us a little bit in the initial phrasing of this tweet, but says, end of OTAs question mark. I'll spoil it right now. It's not. But it says in the tweet, the end of OTAs question mark. The NFL Players Association is working to finalize a proposal to overhaul the offseason starting as soon as next offseason, eliminating voluntary on-field work in the spring in favor of a longer training camp ramp-up with players reporting in mid-June to early July. Per sources, the union has been seeking feedback on the plan from players, a majority of whom support the change, according to sources. This is, again, at Tom Pelissero on Twitter. A formal proposal is expected this summer. Off-season work rules are collectively bargained, and any changes would require an agreement with the NFL. Under new leadership, the NFLPA has consulted medical and performance experts in hopes of creating a common-sense solution for reducing injuries and maximizing players' recovery time. Virtual classroom work would still be permitted in the spring, but no practice until camp. The NFLPA pushed for a revised offseason. Okay, this is an additional note here. The NFLPA push for a revised offseason isn't directly tied to an 18-game season. However, it is worth noting a longer schedule would further shorten the time between the season and training camp. Another reason consolidating players' time into one long break would make sense. Okay, so OTA is not going away. OTA is just being reshaped. OTA is probably going to look more like the COVID calendar, which we just kind of did away with OTAs for spring after that all happened in March of 2020, and everybody came back in some kind of form or fashion. It was a little bit of a little bit scattershot as everybody tried to figure out the proper medical guidance. And of course, the NFL kind of, I don't want to say on the forefront of it, but kind of had to be, given that they were trying to play football games right away. And for players, sure, you would rather have a longer break from football and then just go right back into football. And of course, while it says it isn't directly tied to the future 18-game regular season, it's definitely tied to the 18-game regular season because they want to give players more time off to justify adding the extra game and expanding the regular season and the postseason by extent.
So in theory, after the draft, we would not hear from the Titans, from Brian Callahan in an official press conference settings. We would not see players on the field until that midsummer point.
No, I don't think that's true. I think there'll still be press conferences. It's not like the coaches, they're going to be at the facility, but it's just practice. The only thing that goes away is like the practice part of it. So if you want to show up to the facility and you want to have your meetings in person as opposed to doing them on Zoom, you could do that. But again, it's part of the voluntary portion. Basically, it's just the practice element. So what we wouldn't see is players in helmets and shorts basically before middle of June.
So they just want to create a ramp up to training camp, essentially.
Yeah, and not have a 6-week layoff in between the ramp up. So you're just condensing that part of the calendar as you expand the rest of the calendar and then try and give them a little more rest, which the players want because, teams like the Titans went a whole, 2 weeks without practicing, then played a football game, went out there and kicked the Buffalo Bills' ass. Not that works for everybody, and that's a very, very specific circumstance because they had to play a Tuesday night football game. Whole different thing.
And how many players have a home base somewhere in California, in Florida, in wherever that they go to for the entire offseason and maybe have to come back for OTAs, and especially players on a one-year deal somewhere, right, that are just kind of extending their career bit by bit. I don't know where Odell Beckham lives. He might live in Miami, honestly. That might work out pretty nicely for him. But somebody like an Odell Beckham that maybe his home base is in L.A. and they can spend the whole offseason off until it's time to report back and the ramp-up begins from OTAs straight into training camp. You don't have to go back and forth.
Initial question that I would have, and we'll flesh this out a little bit, because it really doesn't affect you all that much other than the timeline that you will be receiving or just how used to the certain timeline that we've been under for the past couple of years. I mean, not for the past couple of years, for basically the entirety of the time that we've done this in some form or fashion with the NFL offseason. So there's not a huge impact on fans, but it is worth noting that they're making these adjustments. And my initial question would be, so for like a team like the Titans, their first day of on-field anything was April the 8th because they had a new coach and were one of several teams to make a coaching change this offseason, which then allowed them additional practice time ahead of schedule. So are we just going to tack the extra weeks given to teams changing head coaches on to the start of June? Is it as simple as that? Or is there, a whole different level of protocols that have to be worked through for just something like that? Because this team and these players have mentioned several times how important it has been for them to continue to get that extra work. Whether they actually feel that way or not is a different matter. Vets are probably like, oh, April 8th, are you kidding me? Like, I feel like I just took a break from this stuff.
What would this mean for rookie minicamp? Would be my question. Would that get moved along with everything else? Or do you have a rookie minicamp after the draft to get guys in at that point in the offseason and get integrated sooner rather than later?
Yeah, because the rookies don't really have a say in the NFLPA decision-making. It's players that have already been NFL players. And, of course, once you're drafted, of course, you have some say in the NFLPA. But depending on the time that this thing is voted on or approved by the NFLPA and the NFL jointly, rookies are going to have as little a say in this as any particular party out there. So be curious to see how all that changes. That's really the biggest news. There's not a ton of NFL news circulating around. A couple of unretirements I saw. Tony Jefferson trying to make a return to pro football. But other than that, pretty smooth sailing. Titans on the practice field today. They don't have open practice for media. That will be tomorrow. So there will be press conferences and the like that we will carry for you. Coming up next, though, Barrett Sallee will join us. We'll talk a little college football. His Smothered and Covered podcast has been talking to a lot of interesting people about a lot of different subjects in the world of college sports. And, of course, college sports is on the forefront of the sports news cycle with everything that's happening between the NCAA and the Power 5 conferences, kind of. Although, did you see that the Pac-12 merch is on fire sale anywhere that you can get Pac-12 merch? They're just trying to clear out all the boxes, all the extra crap that they have for a conference that no longer matters.
Hey, that's vintage now. That's going to be worth a lot in a few years.
What, are you going to go stock up? 615-737-1045 is the number. Barrett Sallee will join us coming up next. So many people trust Two Rivers Ford. Football players, working moms, business owners. Why? Because Two Rivers Ford has been doing business with integrity for decades. Two Rivers Ford, the South's most trusted Ford dealer. Welcome back on this Tuesday. The show is fueled by Hattie B's Hot Chicken. Lunch not that far away. If you're thinking about chicken, think about Hattie B's. You can download the mobile delivery app today and get it delivered to wherever you are. Barrett Sallee joins us now, at Barrett Sallee on Twitter. You can read him at Outkick.com. You can also read him at AJC.com because there is significant Braves news going on, unfortunately, for Braves fans. We'll ask him about that at the end of the segment. Barrett, thank you for joining us. Have you found it difficult to talk about non-NCAA related issues in the world of college athletics, obviously specific to college football, but it's almost like the college football is the side piece at this point to everything that's going on with the legalese?
Man, yes. Yes, I do. I always joke on my podcast, College Football Smothered and Covered, that actually we're going to talk about football at some point. And I try to. I mean, I honestly try to as much as possible, but I mean, it's never ending with this administrative stuff. And look, this is administrative season. SEC spring meetings are going on in Destin. And of course, the ACC had theirs in Amelia Island a couple weeks ago. And so, you know, there are newsworthy topics, but it's overwhelming how much is going on and how, like, you almost have to have a master's degree to figure out exactly what all of it means. It never ends, man.
Well, if you want a master's degree in college football, the Smothered and Covered podcast is available wherever you get your podcast. We do a little broadcasting around here from time to time, Barrett. Nothing crazy. But you can check out the podcast wherever you get the podcast. Listen to the Tom Luganbill episode. We've had Tom on before. Always a great wealth of insight and knowledge, especially at the roots of the sport. So non-NCAA related, non-lawsuit related, what has been at the top of your discussions when you seek out things that are interesting to you in the sports world? I know you're doing it for an audience, and so you're focused on what the audience wants, but what has kind of piqued your attention most in the last couple of months?
Yeah, I try to be I try to sort of spin it forward as much as possible. It is list season, so we have those lists, right? But I try to come at it with the approach of, we don't know any of these things, right? We look at all these preseason magazines when they come out. We'll have all these questions at media days, and I know for me personally, and I know for a lot of people who I talk to out there, it's impossible to actually discuss properly what all of this stuff means in the era of a 12-team college football playoff, because I sit there and I talked on my show, for 20 minutes the other day, why Tennessee is a college football playoff contender. And people are like, oh, come on, Tennessee. I'm like, y'all, if you're a 9-3 team and don't go to the SEC championship game, you have a pretty good shot. So, I think I try to frame a lot of discussions around that and try to come at it with as few hot takes as possible under that context, and yet people freak out about it because they're not sort of thinking through what the new reality is. So we've been trying to do some of those lists. We've been trying to have some fun with with what we're going to talk about at media days. That's non-administrative, but we can't get away from the administrative stuff, man.
We're trying our damnedest, Barrett. I mean, truly.
Well, see, it's funny, Buck. I sit there, and I've said this on my show as much as possible. I try to view it through the Varsity Blues Jonathan Moxon lens when he's talking about the Gilroy game with his dad. He's like, Gilroy, tell me who wins. Yeah. Tell me what the final product is, and I'll deal with it then. I don't want to know how the sausage is made. Just let me eat the sausage when the sausage is made.
Yeah, I mean, it is curious to an extent, but I just feel like people have so much fatigue about it. So with that, the concept of Tennessee as a college football playoff contender, obviously Vol's been an ascending program. Joe Milton, the stopgap situation, we understood the context of this last season, this most recent season for Josh Heupel and his staff. But as you see it, how much of that opinion, not just based on the expanded playoff field, of course, but specific to Nico Iamaleava, the quarterback who will get the starting job in its entirety for the first time this coming season?
Yeah, I think there's this outside viewpoint that Nico Iamaleava is Joe Milton, right? Great bowl game, all this hype, and then you go into the season and maybe he's not as as good as maybe the hype is. And I keep looking back. I'm like, we knew what Joe Milton was. He lost 2 jobs. We knew he couldn't throw a changeup. This is all known. What do we know about Nico Iamaleava? He can run, and the upside from a passing standpoint is there. Joe Milton never had that. And when you spin it forward with Tennessee, wide receivers are fine, right? Running situation, pretty good. Offensive line situation, tolerable. And you have Josh Heupel. So when I look at Tennessee, I think, okay, Nico can keep that offense good, not average, good. Not necessarily great, but enough to compensate for whatever the defense does from a standpoint of being tired, right? James Pierce is fantastic. He's going to wreck opposing offense's backfield, but you have to have 9 players up front to rotate in and out. So at some point, when you run a hurry-up offense, you're going to have that depth tested. Tennessee might not have that, but if they've got an offense that can compensate, they'll be fine. And to me, Josh Heupel operates a lot like Lane Kiffin, and a lot like I think a lot of coaches should operate these days. Defense doesn't win championships, offense does, and just enough defense is sort of a moving target based on what you do from a scheme standpoint offensively, who you have at quarterback, how often you run plays, all that stuff. So I think Tennessee is going to be fine. I think Nico can keep them in pretty much every single game. They're not going to go undefeated. He's not going to be a superstar every single time out, but he's certainly closer to Hendon Hooker than he is to Joe Milton, and that's going to win a lot of ball games for the Vols.
Barrett Sallee is here with us on 104.5 The Zone. You can check out the Covered and Smothered podcast, also available on YouTube, where you can hit the subscribe button.
So, Barrett,
that
feels like that should be the expectation then, right, for Tennessee, the college football playoff, a team that finished 17th in the final AP poll last season that was hovering around that top 12 mark all last season. So reasonable, right, for Tennessee to have that expectation in the building within the fan base to make the college football playoff. Do you agree with that? And with that said, how many SEC teams should have a reasonable expectation to be in that 12-team playoff by the end of the season?
Well, I wouldn't say the expectation for Tennessee should be that. I think for Tennessee, the expectation would be to have a legitimate chance going into November, right? To look at the landscape and say, okay, you win your ball games, you got a pretty good shot. Because, you have automatic bids. You're not going to necessarily take the top 12 teams. You might have some teams outside the top 25 get in. It's the way things are. But I think for a lot of programs, at least the ones that are not named, Georgia and Ohio State and, even Texas now, having a legitimate shot in November is all you can ask for until you prove you can be a dynasty or until you prove you can be a consistent national championship caliber team. So I think that should be the expectation for Tennessee and basically everybody in the SEC not named Georgia, Texas, maybe Alabama after this season, just because we don't know what we're going to get from Kalen DeBoer. There's no blueprint for that. Outside of those, Ole Miss should be in the playoff. I think the expectation for Ole Miss is that they should be in the playoff, and because they went to a New Year's Six, they won 10 games, they've kept players around. They've hit the transfer portal hard. Lane Kiffin's basically gone all in year one of the 12-team playoff, and he's got to come through. So I think Ole Miss is in that boat. I'm not the biggest Missouri guy, not the biggest, Texas A&M guy. So I think should Missouri fans have an outside shot at the playoff? I mean, maybe if you're a Missouri homer. But beyond that, I just don't see an awful lot of chances for the other SEC teams.
The idea of the pressure on Lane Kiffin and going all in the 12-team playoff format and kind of having at least a little more, to me, a little more viable approach to the transfer portal and the way that he's maximized the transfer portal than, say, Deion, for example. And obviously those programs don't have exact parallels, but there's some similarities in which they've reshaped their roster. What kind of pressure is Lane Kiffin facing at Ole Miss? Because, to me, I look at it and just say, well, I don't want to say that Ole Miss is lucky to have him, but it almost feels like there's a little bit of that vibe. Am I misreading the situation?
No, I think they're a perfect fit. Ole Miss is lucky to have him, and he's lucky to have Ole Miss.
Sure.
Because of, I think that the match is perfect because of how he operates in terms of his roster building, because of how he uses the transfer portal, because, he's not going to be a superstar in the SEC, that he has to have a little bit of an edge with a program that he can build and build successfully. And so I think, Lane's not the guy who's going to build a dynasty, right? He's not going to be Kirby Smart. He's not going to be Nick Saban. He's not going to be Urban Meyer. He's a guy who's sort of the outsider. So what program should you be with? Well, Ole Miss is the exact kind of program. So that's why when he got hired there, I'm like, yeah, that's perfect. He's not going to go anywhere else. He doesn't need to go anywhere else. He's going to make a ton of money, and he's going to, he's going to be a savior there as long as he keeps winning at a pretty high level. So, yeah, and then on top of that, though, now with the 12-team format, he's made it clear he wants to go all in. He's made it, the roster looks like what he wants it to look like. We talk about, a dynamic offense and just enough defense, as long as that defense creates havoc in the offensive backfield. It's exactly what he's built at Ole Miss. So, yeah, it's a match made in heaven. I know Tennessee fans hate to hear that Lane Kiffin's having success, but I mean, if you're going to target an SEC school for Lane to land at and be there for a long, long time, it's Ole Miss. There's no doubt.
They may have a golf ball or two for him, maybe a mustard bottle by chance. But I think we're getting towards the path of reconciliation. I feel like with Lane.
Well, I mean, look. Well, I said this when this happened. Like, it's USC is his dream school, right? Why are you that mad that he went after the dream school when they wanted him? Right? I know Tennessee fans hate how it went down and hate that, what happened after that. But look, if I'm sitting there and my dream job says, hey, come here, we're going to pay you millions and millions and millions of dollars, and we're still a viable team to make the college football or to win national championships at that time, even though the sanctions really hurt them while Lane was there. How many opportunities am I going to have for my dream job to offer me, that role? I never understood why Tennessee fans hated him so much.
Oh, Barrett, but Volve Twitter better than that. Come on. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
I've seen you in there.
Right.
It's okay. It happens.
I personally, Barrett, have forgiven Lane Kiffin as a Tennessee alum. I think I crossed that. I don't know when I crossed that threshold. I think it was after the first time he came back to Neyland as the offensive coordinator at Alabama, and the boos rained down. I remember there was a campaign on campus at that time to hashtag kill Kiffin with silence. It was don't boo the guy. Don't even let him know that, of course, he got booed incessantly. But after that, I think I'm good. I think I've moved on.
Ben, if Tennessee fans were just silent and didn't have a reaction to him, he would hate that so much.
It was a whole campaign.
He would have hated that.
So you talk about Ole Miss having that kind of expectation to get into the 12-team playoff. And Buck and I have this argument all the time about teams that make the playoffs. Is a team that is in the NFL playoffs a Super Bowl contender just because they are in the playoffs? Buck says yes. I say no. Does the 12-team college football playoff change at all how we talk about national championship contenders for a team that maybe picks up a loss in November that normally would all but take them out of the 14 playoff, but now they hang around in that 12-team playoff discussion? Does that net get any wider of the national championship actual contenders that we can reasonably talk about come November?
I think it's not to dodge your question, kind of, right? I think generally in the 14 playoff, there were 2, maybe 3 teams that are national championship worthy, right? Because Michigan State got in there, Clemson with Kelly Bryant, like those aren't national championship caliber teams. Last year you look at the 14 playoff and it's like, okay, well, Georgia actually might have been the best team and they weren't in it. So, some years you're going to have a playoff where there are 2 teams that are capable. Numbers 3 and 4 aren't, but then number 5 and number 6 might be, right? And I think that actually might happen this year because, 2 of those top 4 spots are going to be gobbled up by most likely an ACC and a Big 12 team. And if it's not one of those teams, it's a group of 5 team that just happens to be ranked higher. And it's like, okay, well, in reality now you're going to have the top 2 seeds probably will be national championship worthy. This year, I don't think 3 and 4 will be, but 5 and 6 and 7 might be. So it's just, it's sort of going to change the way you look at it because the top 4 conference champions have to be the top 4 teams. And a lot of times the Power 4 conference champions really, they're not 2 or maybe 1 or 2 of them are not championship caliber.
Barrett Sallee on with us. So the administrative stuff that is happening in Destin. I saw that SEC Commissioner Greg Sankey was obviously talking about the settlement with the NCAA, and he talked about the way it kind of lays out a pathway for the structure of college athletics moving forward. It's obviously a lot still to be figured out. So to you, Barrett, what is your biggest questions about that pathway, about what is going to happen along the way from here on out as we move into this next step of revenue sharing in college athletics?
Yeah, I want to see exactly what the payment structure looks like, and not from a salary cap or things like that. Because like that $15 to $20 million, that's got to be spread out over a lot of athletes, and it's really not that much. If you believe what Tennessee paid Nico, you're gobbling up pretty much half of that revenue, half of that salary cap. So I want to know what the future of collectives looks like and how under the table payments fit into that mix. Because I kind of joked on this on my show. Before, the pendulum was on one side where everybody was getting paid under the table. it swung way over to the other side, due in large part to Tennessee and their legal stuff with the lawsuit, where everybody was getting paid through the collectives, and there was really no guardrail. Well, what we're going to have is the pendulum coming back to the center, and you're going to have collectives doing their things. You're going to have payments through the schools legally, and you're probably going to have a lot of payments under the table too. So what does that look like? Who does that benefit? Does it change the way group of 5 teams operate? How does it change the way that maybe the lesser programs in the Power 4 operate? So that's kind of what I'm keeping my eyes on. Like, the haves are still going to be the haves. The have-nots are still going to be the have-nots, but there might be what some of these lesser Power 4 teams look like. How many players aren't going to take the money and put a lot of game film on tape in the group of 5 level? It might be a lot, because you're still going to get some money, much as other teams or other players, but the benefit might outweigh the fact that bank accounts might not look as big as some of these other players who are sitting on the bench for 2 years, not playing at the Power 5 level.
His show, as he mentioned, is the Smothered and Covered College Football Podcast, available wherever you get your podcast, the Believe Network. You can also subscribe to it on YouTube. He does also cover the Braves for the AJC Sports. And, of course, we don't do a ton of baseball here in Nashville, Barrett, but the news of Ronald Acuna Jr. going down over the weekend, just the impact on the Braves season, and unfortunately for Braves fans, that is just a terrible tragedy to see that happen yet again.
Yeah, it's you kind of look at it two ways, right? It sucks that he's not going to be there from a pure entertainment standpoint. The baseball is going to suffer without him there. The Braves are going to suffer without him there, because I think a lot of people around Braves country were sort of the mindset, yeah, he struggled this year, but he's going to turn it around. The back of the baseball card is still the back of the baseball card, not necessarily a 40-70 year. He's going to get things turned around. And so, yeah, it's interesting, though, because there are reinforcements, right? Sean Murphy and Austin Riley are back. Adam Duvall will be more successful as an everyday player rather than a platoon player. Jared Kelnick is starting to turn things around, and the pitching has been lights out, especially Chris Sale. So, I think as long as the offense, like guys like Matt Olson, continue their hot streak, and Kelnick kind of comes through, and Duvall does have success, I still, is this a World Series? It's just a little different. I do wonder how they're going to end up for the aggressiveness on the base paths. I think Michael Harris, running. I think you'll see Ozzie Albies taking more chances, and I think you're going to see Adam Duvall take a lot of chances too on the base paths, because I don't think people realize that dude can fly. So it's just going to look a little different, maybe be a little more risky on the base paths, but I think they'll be okay, especially if Chris Sale keeps doing what Chris Sale does, because that dude, man, he is unreal.
Barrett Sallee, unreal. At Barrett Sallee is where you can follow him on Twitter. You can read him at Outkick.com. And like I said, the Braves Report and the Smothered and Covered podcast, wherever you get your podcast. Barrett, it's the first time you've been on when I've been here. I know Lucas has had you on when I've been out, but it was our great pleasure to speak with you, and hopefully we can do it again sometime soon.
Absolutely. Thanks, all, for having me.
That's the main man, Barrett Sallee, with us on 104.5 The Zone. A lot happening in the world of college football, and it's rare that the Braves creep into the show lineup, but Ronald Acuna Jr. going down, obviously, huge news. 615-737-1045 is the number. Jackson, we have a giveaway for what in sports, or just generally what in life, made you say, oh no, this week. Coming up next, what do we have?
We have tickets to see Jim Gaffigan at the Ryman on June 1st. So
excellent.
Funny guy.
The best oh no submission will get Jim Gaffigan tickets.
That's coming up next. 615-737-1045. You tell us what over the weekend made you say, oh, no, because there's a couple of things. And we'll send you to see Jim Gaffigan on June the 1st. That's right. Time to tell us what in the world, not even in sports, made you say, oh no, this week. Jackson, again, the prize if they call in with the number 615-737-1045 and they give us the best submission. What do they get?
2 tickets to see Jim Gaffigan on June 1st at the Ryman.
Excellent. 615-737-1045. You want to go see Jim Gaffigan? All you got to do is call in and tell us it's a holiday weekend. There's all kind of stuff that just made me drop my head in my hands this weekend, whether it's the Pacers getting swept out last night in just embarrassing fashion. You guys left before the end of that game, but Lucas and Bert and I were at a friend's house for a cookout yesterday, and the Pacers-Celtics Game 4 was going on in Indiana, and the Pacers had a lead for a good chunk of the fourth quarter, and then a sign or a little scrolling, just a graphic popped up on the screen that said that the Pacers had a over 90% chance of winning the games in a couple of these games. And in the first 3, they have had a 90% chance of victory heading in to the fourth quarter or something to that effect. And they found ways to blow games late, as they did again last night. Certainly that was one, but that's not mine. Mine is kickers. Kickers just generally. I don't even care about Butker, all right? I'm sick of kickers generally. I now understand why football players don't care about kickers. I don't want to say actual football players. But I now understand why most football players don't care about the kickers, because the kickers normally don't have anything to contribute but the field goal kicking. And when they open their mouths, they usually do something dumb. Not just Harrison Butker. How about Brandon McManus, who gets a lawsuit filed against him, the Jaguars kicker. And he is, I believe, now in Washington. Is he a commie?
He is a commander.
No, he's a commie. He's not a commander. Either way, he's getting a lawsuit filed against him. So this is allegations of sexual misconduct involving 2 flight attendants, and it brings about another potentially major issue for the team. Lucas, do you remember what happened to the Tennessee Titans after flying home from a Thursday night football game against the Green Bay Packers that they had emerged victorious from?
Yes.
Probably, if not the best performance of the 2022 season. It was damn near.
There was a situation.
There was a situation. The offensive coordinator was intoxicated. He drove home. He was arrested for DUI. And his employment did not end there, but it did come to a conclusion at the end of the season. But alcohol was somewhere, if not outright being served, being consumed on the team plane, which is a big no-no. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So it's not just the kicker sexually harassing and having some level of sexual misconduct and being sued over it. For the Jacksonville Jaguars, it has now opened them up to additional scrutiny and investigation, because it's not just Todd Downing's DUI. There were also Commanders players that were disciplined for having beer on the team plane back from Philadelphia after a Monday night win, and the league made it very, very clear that the future penalties would be even worse for the teams who had alcohol on the team flights. So now the Jags are opened up to sexual misconduct lawsuits from a former kicker, and also investigation about alcohol consumption and alcohol being served on a team plane. Bad day to be a Jaguar. Yeah, that's right, Peyton Manning. That's such a great... It's great. When the Pro Bowl mattered, not just the football, but when Peyton Manning is being interviewed by the broadcasters of the Pro Bowl on the sideline after the Mike Vanderjagt situation, where the Canadian kicker for the Colts at the time has a little too much to drink. He's being interviewed. He takes out Peyton Manning recklessly. Peyton Manning immediately gets in front of a microphone and just keeps talking about that idiot kicker. So now anytime one of these kickers does anything dumb, I'm sure Butker will do something again, because now he's the only kicker that anybody can talk about. We'll play that sound.
So this article of the ESPN report describing the lawsuit from the flight attendants against Brandon McManus, that Jane Doe 1, it's Jane Doe 1 and Jane Doe 2, right, accused McManus of trying to kiss her while she was seated during a session of turbulence, and a couple of other things he is accused of. But Doe 1 alleges during the first assault, she made eye contact with another Jaguars player who she said looked ashamed of McManus's behavior. So this is just a terrible look. It's just a gross story to read through. And the Jacksonville Jaguars, kickers, and lawsuits just continues to be a weird and random trend in the NFL.
That's true. The kicker that got kicked was a Jag.
Yes.
The Jags have been involved in lawsuits. Is it FanDuel that they're caught up in some kind of situation about a team employee siphoning off millions of dollars having something to do with FanDuel? I can't remember the exact details. Either way.
My oh-no is just the NBA Conference Finals. The games, some of them have been good and fun. Like Game 4 was fun between Celtics and Pacers. Game 1 was electric. Went into overtime, crazy last-minute corner 3.
Mavs Timberwolves too.
And those games have been battles as well, but looking like they are both headed for a sweep. Celtics get it done yesterday, and the Mavs host Game 4 tonight with a 3-0 lead over the Timberwolves. I had really high hopes for that series in particular. Just an absolute 6-7 game battle between Anthony Edwards and Luka Doncic. Winner gets to be the face of the NBA, right? If you want to look at it that way. Games have been fun, but obviously the results have gone the way of the Dallas Mavericks, and it's just been a little bit underwhelming.
Anthony Edwards hasn't been much at all.
No, not really.
In this at least series.
Luka has.
You're probably tired. Jackson, what you got?
Did both of you watch the SEC Tournament Championship?
A little bit.
Yes.
So LSU has the bases loaded, and they have a guy leading off so far on first that Blake Burke is able to run at the pitch and get him out at first base to end the inning. A huge spot for LSU. Really, that was the pivotal moment in the game. LSU had a big opportunity to either tie or win that game, and they didn't because their first base, or the guy they had on first base, let off too much and was able to be picked off by Cal Stark and Blake Burke.
I don't know what he was doing. That was rough, but you're right. That was a big, huge momentum swing in that game. That was as fired up as Tennessee was at any point in that game.
615-737-1045 for the opportunity to win some Jim Gaffigan tickets. You'll tell us what made you say, oh no, coming up next. The Tennessee Men's Clinic has been helping guys for over a decade. Since 2014, they've been working with dudes who have been dealing with erectile dysfunction and are having trouble losing weight. If you've put this off for way too long, specific to ED, it's time to get it done and move forward with your sex life. The Tennessee Men's Clinic is here to help. Guys hate going to the doctor, but the Tennessee Men's Clinic is treatment, and their staff are there to make you feel as comfortable as humanly possible about a situation that they have had great success with. Specifically, their ED and weight loss treatments truly changed lives and are non-surgical. They are seeing success rates as high as 90%. They are even offering aesthetic enhancements and cosmetic procedures at the Tennessee Men's Clinic, and they specialize in seeing guys who think they're out of luck and are looking to regain hope that they can be successful in the bedroom and beyond. They even offer same or next day appointments. So stop thinking about it and get in there. Call the Tennessee Men's Clinic, 615-208-9090. That's 615-208-9090, or go online to TennesseeMen'sClinic.com and book an appointment today.
It is 11 o'clock. Good morning. I'm Lucas Panzica from the 104.5 The Zone studios. OTAs, Titans back on the practice field today. We will hear from head coach Brian Callahan again with the media availability tomorrow at Ascension St. Thomas Sports Park. Elsewhere in the NFL, in Cincinnati, wide receivers Jamar Chase and T. Higgins both not present for Bengals OTAs as both are seeking new deals. College baseball regionals are set. The NCAA postseason gets underway. Tennessee is the number one overall seed after beating LSU 4-3 in the SEC Championship Sunday. The Vols will host Southern Miss, Indiana, and Northern Kentucky in the Knoxville Regional starting on Friday. Vanderbilt headed to the Clemson Regional. They will take on Clemson, Coastal Carolina, and High Point. On Monday, news broke of basketball legend Bill Walton's passing due to cancer. The Hall of Famer and broadcaster was 71 years old. For other foundation repairs and waterproofing needs, visit USSTN.com. Breaking news at once on your home for the Titans and Vols. This is 104.5 The Zone.
We're going to continue our team-by-team previews specific to teams on the Titans schedule here in just a little bit. We've got some phone calls to get to as well. For those of you who want to tell us what made you say, oh no, over the Memorial Day weekend, we got a pair of Jim Gaffigan tickets to give away. 615-737-1045 is the number. Jackson, Lucas, and I are with you, or I guess, and me are with you until 1 o'clock. 615-737-1045 is the number, like I said. And if you want to live stream the show, you got that on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Twitch. Throw us a like on YouTube if you're hanging out there. So the Patriots are a team that we're going to take a look at today. And the Patriots have had, at least of late, a lot of Titans connections. Seems like we're getting away from that with a bit of a regime change. But the Patriots have had as interesting an offseason as any NFL team out there for no other reason than the coaching change that they made. So we'll talk about that here in just a little bit. But first, you have to tell us what made you say, oh no. So Jackson went with LSU in the SEC Tournament Championship game over the weekend. Lucas, your oh no was?
NBA Conference Finals, underwhelming, looking like it's headed for 2 sweeps.
We are probably heading in that. Well, I don't know. I don't know what direction we're heading in. Because I didn't think that the Pacers were going to get swept last night until they got to the fourth quarter. Yeah. You could see it just kind of slipping away very, very late. And then mine, everything going on with the former Jacksonville Jaguars kicker, Brandon McManus. A lot of gross kicker news as of late. So, what do you got for us? For the opportunity to win some Jim Gaffigan tickets at the Ryman on June the 1st, right around the corner, as a matter of fact. Kyle is in construction up first.
What's going on, guys?
Hey, bud.
I got to go with Harrison Buckner, man. Just doubling down, saying that he meant what he said, didn't mean to offend nobody. I've had a single mom. She worked, cooked, cleaned, had 2 jobs and a career. So I just don't get your life is stuck in a house, and that's just the beauty of it. No, you can have a fulfilling life with your family, kids, friends, career. And I respect the fact that there's some churches that believe that the men work, the women stay home and make it a homemaker, but I can't get down with that.
All right, it's a good submission, Kyle. Thank you for the call. I think most people don't get down with that. Wait, what's Peyton Manning doing there?
He's talking.
He's a good kicker, but he's an idiot. Yeah, it's the concept of saying that to a giant group of people that just worked for 4 years to set up a foundation to have a career. That's the most mind-blowing thing about the Bucker stuff.
Well, and he did it at the Regina. So he was here in Nashville. I didn't realize that the place that he was speaking 2 days ago was here in Nashville. Regina or Regina?
Wait, hold on. What are you talking about?
Harrison Butker spoke Friday at Regina Colley Academy Courage Under Fire Gala in Nashville, Tennessee.
Oh.
The thing that Kyle is referencing, him doubling down on the amount of
the commencement was in Kansas, a school in Kansas.
But he recently made an appearance apparently right down the road. I'd forgive me if I've mispronounced this academy's Courage Under Fire Gala. Anyway, so he was a speaker at this thing because the initial commencement speech was at Benedictine College, and you saw that the Benedictine nuns came out against what Harrison Butker had to say about, his beliefs on women and not specifically the workplace, but women as homemakers being the ultimate achievement. And a lot of women, understandably, taking a ton of issues with that. Goody is an athletic trainer. Up next.
What's up, guys? How you doing?
Good.
So, my oh no came when I was watching baseball, and specifically the Braves. When I saw Acuna hurt his knee, I immediately thought, oh no, not again. And then hearing that he tore his ACL again made me say, oh no. Yeah. Just awful for baseball.
I appreciate the call. It has to be. I haven't talked to Will today. How's he doing?
Have not followed up with Will Bowling on. Yeah, I've not done the wellness check. Don't know how the BBS is going for the Braves fans.
The BBS. Well, that's one letter off.
Battered Brave syndrome.
I had to think about it for a second. Yeah, Ronald Acuna tearing his ACL is just a season-ending injury. Anytime baseball loses a legitimate star, it's terrible for the sport, and for it to have semi-local ties here for so many Braves fans, I think is pretty deflating. All right, who's going to see Jim Gaffigan, Kyle or Goody?
Jackson?
I'm going to go Kyle.
Okay, Kyle, we appreciate. Somebody said the wellness check. What a terrible pun.
I love it.
Terrible pun. Shame on you, Harold Hockett on YouTube. The wellness check.
Will would approve.
All right, so congratulations to Kyle. He's going to go see Jim Gaffigan on June the 1st at the Ryman Auditorium. Stay on hold, Kyle, and Jackson will be with you momentarily to get some necessary information. All right, so we pivot then to team previews. We're going to do every day but Wednesday at 11 o'clock. Take a look at a couple of teams around the NFL, starting with the teams on the Titans schedule, and the AFC East is a division that's on the Titans schedule this year. The New England Patriots have had as interesting an offseason as any NFL team out there. They will not be in Nashville until week 9, so it'll be November before Tennessee sees the new-look Patriots, but they are very new-look. Bill Belichick no longer skulking the sidelines of the New England Patriots for the first time in the better part of 2 decades. That's now Gerard Mayo's role as the head coach there, taking in as the successor to the greatest NFL coach in the history of football. You have a lot of roster changes. They draft Drake May with the 3rd overall pick. They ship Mac Jones down to Jacksonville, punting on that experiment very, very soon thereafter. They can't sign a wide receiver in free agency to save their lives because they'd rather play for the Tennessee Titans and DeAndre Hopkins and Calvin Ridley than go to New England, it seems, no matter whom the coach is. But as you look at the Patriots roster, we got a few qualifications for each team that we're going to talk about. So, are you buying or selling the New England Patriots offseason, where the coaching change happens, where the quarterback change happens? Jake Brisket probably is going to be the week 1 starter. Jacoby Brissett, barring some kind of significant injury. Bailey Zappi is still there. Joe Milton was also a 6th-round pick of the New England Patriots in this most recent NFL draft. Their draft class, they tried to do a lot on offense, just based on the number of picks that they spent specifically there and where the UDFAs have kind of filled out the rest of the depth chart, but the bulk of the draft was offense. Are you buying or selling the New England Patriots offseason?
I'm buying in terms of what they're trying to build out. Like, I'm not buying their offseason in that they are contenders to even get to the playoffs this year, right? Like, that's a different conversation. The Patriots could only achieve so much in this offseason with the coaching change and where they were financially and some of their expiring contracts and things like that. So their quarterback is in place. There is next to no talent at the skill position spots on offense. Like, who is the Patriots' best player on offense right now? We have no idea what Drake May is going to be. Is it Ramondre Stevenson? Is it Hunter Henry?
Hunter Henry's been pretty good. I'd be curious to see what happens with Jalen Polk this year, the rookie wide receiver. I could make an argument based on how he was playing that Jacoby Brissett may be the best player on the Patriots offense right now, just for the importance of the quarterback position. It's probably Hunter Henry.
So there you go. They're in a tough spot. Like, it's going to be really interesting to watch Drake May, how many obstacles he kind of has to overcome, even to see progress in his rookie year.
The defense is honestly, it's as big a question to me as the offense is, just because Belichick is still an otherworldly defensive coach. And the defense has been the Patriots' saving grace despite all the miscues that they've had on the offensive side of the football. So I'm selling the offseason, if for no other reason than this is not enough to make the team viable in 2024, especially in the AFC East. The AFC East is a bit of a cluster, and the Patriots just, Tampa didn't seem close last year, and they won a playoff game. So let me not completely discount New England, but I would sell the Patriots offseason, and I would also qualify them in the two categories that we're going to talk about here. Contender or pretender. Obviously, the Patriots in the AFC East are a pretender at this point in time.
No doubt about that. But when you're asking about buying or selling the offseason, does that have to mean, okay, are you buying their offseason in that it makes them a contender this year?
No, it shouldn't be specific to contention this year.
It should be in the context of their long-term plan, right?
And the long-term plan is Drake May.
Yeah, and what more could the Patriots have done this offseason to make you feel better about them, right? Like Calvin Ridley.
Could have signed Calvin Ridley.
Sure, and I guess, I don't know how much more Calvin Ridley would have had to have seen on that piece of paper to sign with the Patriots over the Jags or Titans, because he very clearly wanted to stay in this part of the country. There were a ton of factors that were not in favor of the Patriots. So I don't know how much more they would have had to offer. I guess you could have gotten Drake May, one, just quality, reliable target at wide receiver, because Hunter Henry is your best pass catching option right now.
And he's been solid. Let's not discount that. So I get what you're saying about it, but there's still not enough there for me. And they weren't in the best cap situation, but they re-signed Mike Owenu, the tackle guard that I know a lot of Titans fans were interested in. Anthony Jennings coming in, Josh Uche being re-signed, bringing KJ Osborne in on a 1-year deal, and Kendrick Bourne getting a 3-year deal. It was a lot of retention as much as anything. That's the reason. That there's a lot of, maybe it's as big a thing about the coaching staff for me as anything, because a lot of the players are the same, which is what makes me sell their offseason plan. Now, maybe Gerard Mayo is looking around at what Bill Belichick did on the offensive side of the football, specific to the coaching staff, and saying, no, these players are good. We can stand to get a lot more out of them if the coordinator situation is improved, if the coaching situation is improved, which sounds crazy to say out loud, because the coaching situation that he is replacing is Bill Belichick, even if that's not specifically his side of the football.
And there's been next to no talk about the offensive coordinator that's going to be tasked with helping Drake May along his rookie year, and Alex Van Pelt. I feel like that might be the first time I've heard that name this offseason. The former Browns offensive coordinator and QB coach from last year, and he was the Browns OC since 2020. Been working in Cincinnati as well. He overlapped a little bit with Brian Callahan. So
you've been in the NFL for a long time.
Yeah, 53. He's been coaching in the league since 2006 in some sort of capacity. He hasn't been on a ton of teams, though. To be in the league for about 20 years and to only be on your, 1, 2, 3, 4th, 5th team, it's not terribly lengthy, but Alex Van Pelt, critically important for the Patriots this year. Titans see them in Week 9, Nissan Stadium.
So we will continue our team-by-team preview on Thursday, because, of course, tomorrow at 11 o'clock is the dumbest thing in sports this week, and that is unimpeachable. Lucas has been trying to get me to talk about a damn guard for the better part of 2 weeks. I don't know why, but it's coming up next. Thank you for doing the Grateful Dead thing today, Jackson. Tried to fight me on when Grateful Dead Day actually was earlier this month, forgetting, of course, that Bill Walton passed at 71 years old, which is just awful. He might be my favorite game broadcaster, just because. Well, we'll get into Bill Walton later on in the show, because for some reason you keep wanting to drag me into guard talk, and I want you in front of, whatever higher power you believe in, the audience and Jackson, to explain to me why the hell you want to spend 20 minutes talking guards on May the 28th.
Well, now it sounds worse, and you're making it sound like I'm trying to rip you away from honoring Bill Walton. You had to
because
open
you
it
tried
that way.
to get me to do it in the middle of the NCAA lawsuit on Friday.
Very sad to hear that news yesterday.
Yeah, so go
about
ahead and
Bill
explain
Walton.
why I should not remember one of the greatest broadcasters of our time.
No, don't do that.
And
You don't get to
instead
do
I
that.
should talk about a guard.
You don't get to do that.
Go ahead.
I don't understand why you are just so. It's like you're allergic to talking about one of the most important players on the Titans roster, a near top 10 pick from a year ago, and
You can't
what
even
he's
sex
having
it
to
up
do
with
in
being
year
a
two.
top 10 pick, a near top 10 pick, he says.
He wasn't a top 10 pick. What do you want me to do? We just have not talked, I feel like, that much about Peter Skoronski and asked the question of just how much the appendectomy affected him last year. Because put it into perspective a little bit. Like, we didn't really talk about it a lot in the moment. I mean, we covered it. We tracked his return. And what are you doing? You look like you would rather be anywhere else right now. You get to do this, Buck. You get to do this job. But anyway.
You came in here bitching about the NFL schedule after damn near 2 weeks off in Italy like you were me, all right? You don't get to tell me what kind of, you know how often in the last 3 years I've looked over at you and your eyes are glazed over and you're not listening to whatever I say. God forbid I do it to you for one segment.
So
why?
Think about this.
You want to talk to me about Peter Skoronski's appendectomy that happened in October on May the 28th? You want to do this now?
This is why I want to talk about it, because I haven't really fully thought about it in this context. Peter Skoronski, who comes out of college as a high draft pick to the Titans out of a terrible football team that went 1-11 his last year at Northwestern. So he's thrown into the fire. He's immediately a day one starter at left guard. So he's already tasked with blocking grown men NFL defensive linemen for the first time in his life.
Yes.
And then week 2 comes along. So he's already at probably some sort of strength and size disadvantage, right? Peter Skoronski is not what he hopefully will be in 5 or so years.
He looks like a refrigerator right now.
And in week 2, was it week 2, his appendix bursts. And so now he's down 20 pounds, and he's having to climb out of that while simultaneously playing left guard his rookie year on an offensive line where there is basically a blank space next to him at left tackle that he's having to compensate for and be stretched out for on a team that is really struggling. Mm-hmm. So it should not be that surprising to us that Peter Skoronski took the dip that he did last season when you think about all of those things piled on top of each other. So the question is, could Peter Skoronski be the biggest candidate for the biggest leap year 1 to year 2 of any of the guys taken in last year's draft? Bigger than Tyjae Spears, bigger than even Will Levis.
Oh, that's a different conversation.
With what? No, because it has to do with what plagued Peter Skoronski last year. There were so many factors that led to Skoronski struggling at different points last season. The adjustments you got to make as a rookie, playing a 17-game season for the first time in your life, and then having an organ removed right at the beginning of the season and having to ramp back up while playing games every weekend. I feel like it sets up really well for Skoronski at full health, which he talked about a little bit last week at OTAs, and now working under Bill Callahan and potentially having a better solution next to him at left tackle to put year 1 next to year 2 and say Peter Skoronski made the biggest strides. I feel like that is a very real possibility.
Oh, sure. It's a very compelling discussion. I just don't understand why the hell you want to have it on Tuesday, May the 28th.
Because we just heard from the guy. We just heard from him a few days ago.
We heard it from him a week ago.
Yeah, exactly. So I wanted to talk about it after we heard from him, and you didn't want to talk about it.
Well, because there were much more pressing things than the guard, okay? Like, if everything goes to plan, Lucas, I don't have to say Peter Skoronski's name hardly at all this year. If everything goes well, you don't notice him. If he makes the kind of jump that you're talking about, we do as little guard talk as at any other point in the history of the show, which would delight me because I told you this offseason, I don't want to spend another offseason talking about a left tackle. I would very much like to not care about guards, okay? The fact that we have been forced basically at gunpoint to talk and listen, I'm very aware of how important offensive linemen are. You don't have to tell me. I have watched your product as a football team be almost non-functioning for the better part of 2 seasons, specifically because of the offensive line. Do not mistake my position for being not giving enough consideration to one of the most important position groups on any football team. And I could argue that's as important a position group as the position that the offensive line is tasked with protecting, because you can do a lot more with lesser quarterback play than you can with that lesser offensive line play, as evidenced by this team and Ryan Tannehill having a good offensive line, a good run game. The conversation that you just tried to pivot to, which is not what the topic that you floated with me a week ago when I tried to fight you off from talking about this.
Oh, so now it's a good discussion.
Yes, it is a good discussion. It's still more of a summer discussion, but within the context of players from that draft class and who stands to have the greatest leap in production, and if not outright production, who can be the better version or who can take the biggest step as a player, right? From what they were a year ago to what they can be. The case for Skoronski is a great one. You've upgraded around him, specifically with not just Latham, but Cushenberry, as much as any other player at any other position, right? It's not like Jeff got the kind of help around him that Peter Skoronski did. You could argue Levis because of the sum of the parts, and Spears is a product of that backfield, but specific to what it is that Peter Skoronski is going to have to do, playing the left guard, the center being significantly better. I don't know how much. I can't say that J.C. Latham is significantly better than Dillard because he's a rookie and we haven't seen him do it, but fair to expect that J.C. Latham will not. Well, I don't know if he's going to struggle as much as Dillard did because he's a rookie, but there's reason to have confidence in J.C. Latham. Of the players from that draft class, though, so let's say if Peter Skoronski takes the biggest, has the most improvement of any of the players from the 2023 draft class, but Will Levis is the direct beneficiary of that, and Tajay Spears is the direct beneficiary of that. We're not going to come back, Lucas, and have a conversation about, Peter Skoronski was the most improved 2023 draft pick of any of the draft picks because who's behind Peter Skoronski? Levis and Spears. And you're going to look at Levis and you're going to look at Spears and be like, the running back was great. The quarterback was so much better. And the guard will go by the wayside. Now, that's a big part of it. Having Peter Skoronski to succeed. And that was something that he himself, Peter Skoronski, the left guard, spoke about last week when we got the opportunity to meet with him at OTA. So let's hear from Peter Skoronski talking specifically about how much easier it has been getting acclimated in this offseason after his rookie year.
Yeah, I don't know if it was a focus so much as I feel like, that happened to me last season. I was maybe a little light. Not my strongest last year, and it's hard enough to keep weight on a normal season, let alone losing 20 pounds with the surgery. So, it wasn't anything planned. I just was training and eating and trying to do my best, and I feel pretty strong. I feel pretty lean, definitely heavier, but feeling good and feeling strong.
So that's Skoronski, and now here's his head coach, Brian Callahan, speaking about Peter as well.
Yeah, he's put in some really good work. I think he looks great physically. He looks like he's supposed to look. I think probably got a little bit lighter because of the appendectomy I think he had. It probably contributed to some of that. But he looks like what guards are supposed to look like. He's put a lot of really good work in. I'm pleased with his progress.
What does he stand to gain with Latham and Cushenberry sandwiching him there?
I think you have a veteran center, which always helps to be able to get things lined up the way you need them. You got 3 really pretty powerful people on the same side, and so that makes some of those combinations easier. And it's easier to move people when you got strength on both sides. So I think he stands to benefit from the power that those guys have, and then from the savviness and veteranness that Lloyd's got. And then he's going to have to help JC as well, because JC's it's his first time, playing NFL tackle, and so he's got a learning curve too. So that part, all 3 of those guys will benefit. They will all benefit from playing with each other, I think, on both sides, both JC and Peter with Lloyd on that left side.
So that is Brian Callahan speaking with the media last week. And again, Titans coaches and players will be made available tomorrow. They are on the practice field today. Was Peter Skoronski good as a rookie?
By what standard?
No,
like
there's the standard of an NFL guard.
If it's about the standard of an NFL left guard, then no.
He was not good. We are in agreement. Are there reasons that Peter Skoronski was not good last year? Of course. There are 1,000,001. To have nuance about the guard discussion is one that Titans fans will be willing to have because they also understand the gravity of how bad his situation was and how much better, in theory, it stands to be this year. He's still not talked about as a potential Pro Bowl caliber or all-pro caliber player, though you can see a lot of the violence, a lot of the finish, a lot of the technique stuff that could make him the kind of player that's going to solidify your left side for years to come. God forbid you have an offensive lineman who makes it to a second contract here. Is Taylor Lewan the last offensive lineman to make it to a second contract? Did Ben got an extension?
Yeah, like Aaron Brewer, like a year tacked on, that type of thing.
Oh, God.
But no, like actually getting paid. Taylor Lewan would be the last one.
So he has talked about, and Lucas, we had him on at training camp, and I thought he did an excellent job explaining to not just us but the audience how much different his job was at guard than it was at tackle. And he walked us through it, right? The idea that the action happens so much faster on the inside than you're prepared for at tackle. The fact that your stance is significantly different at guard than it is at tackle. Things that he doesn't have to think twice about now in mid-May or late May as he prepares for another NFL season that had him in a bit of a blender.
In July.
Yes.
Right before, and that's pre-appendectomy.
Chosen _522 on YouTube, and you can interact on the show with the show on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch. You can also call us, 615-737-1045. She says, outside of having Dillard as a left tackle next to him, they changed his position after he was drafted, and the coaching staff stunk, if you ask me. I feel like Peter deserves a little more grace. It's not like I'm unwilling to offer Peter Skoronski grace. I'm very cognizant of what this kid's circumstance was last year.
I mean, let me ask you this. Who was at a bigger disadvantage last year? Peter Skoronski or Will Levis?
Levis.
I feel like it's a closer conversation than you're insinuating here with what was on either side of Skoronski with the left tackle and with Aaron Brewer at center, the appendectomy in the middle of it, a position change in your rookie year of the NFL, and having to gain weight back during the season while you're still learning on the move and having to block 28-year-old defensive lineman Trey Hendrickson in their prime. That's tough. So I think it is a lot closer. Levis because of the nature of the quarterback position and the pressure on the quarterback position.
And Levis because all five of them were objectively bad at any given point. So it's not like, Skoronski, and you can't boil down the guard's job to it's just the guard's job, because it's never just the guard's job. You've got help. You've got blocking assignments. You're constantly working and talking to the other two players on either side of you, so you can't just boil it down as simply like the quarterback. And the quarterback obviously has a million different parts connected to him as well.
But like outside of a season-ending injury, which did not happen to Peter Skoronski, almost everything went wrong, right? Offensive line was terrible. He had no help to either side of him. An appendectomy early in the year, and he's having to gain like almost everything around Peter Skoronski that could have propped him up.
One of the slowest wide receiver cores in football, which means that you're blocking for longer because the guys are having harder times coming open and having lack of success there. The quarterback, the pressure is right in his face. No,
a first-year offensive line coach with a coaching staff that gets fired at the end of the season. Like nothing around Skoronski went right for him, apart from not having an injury that completely took away his rookie season.
What would you say went right for Levis?
What went right for Levis?
Because Skoronski can't have the Atlanta debut, right? There's nothing that for Peter that's going to compare.
Well, that's what went right for Levis, right? The flashes against Atlanta, against Miami in a primetime environment. Like Levis had some things go right for him in that it gave people reason to be excited about Will Levis moving forward, right? Where for a guard, it's much more difficult to accomplish that. It's a lot harder to look back and say, well, you know what? Skoronski was pretty damn good in that, whatever, that Colts game or whatever his best performance was
good
of the
against
season.
The Saints.
Sure.
I
Week
came
one.
away from the New Orleans game being like, all right, that's a good defensive front. Tannehill having a nightmare performance that's not on the offensive line. I mean, Dillard had just a garbage first half. Actually, no, I think Dillard struggled more in the second half, if I remember correctly. Like, Dillard wasn't outright nightmarish in the first half, but still. The Callahan thing is as big a saving grace. Like, we're not talking about Will Levis getting the kind of help, or to at least the extent of help, the kind of gap that exists between what Will Levis had in, let's say, Charles London versus what Will Levis now stands to have in the combination of Brian Callahan, Nick Holtz, and Bo Hardigree, who's the Titans' current quarterback coach. Skoronski getting the most specific and most detailed kind of offensive line coaching on top of the physical presence that he stands to have about him without the appendectomy or the ruptured appendix lingering over everything that he did for basically the entire season after week 2. I can't believe you got 20 minutes of guard talk out of me on May the 20th.
Oh, it was so hard. It was so hard, Jackson. This job is so hard.
It's not about the degree of difficulty. I just figured that you may want to talk about other sports actually going on rather than guard talk.
You're so unlucky to be doing this, Buck. How did you draw the short straw like
Lucas
this?
wanted to talk about a guard instead of Bill Walton dying. Don't
do that. Don't do that.
This is the most important time of year for you to have freedom of movement, and you understand how difficult that can be if you're dealing with nagging joint pain. If you're not able to enjoy the summer as much as you want because of that joint pain, it is time to call the nation's leader in regenerative medicine. That's QC Kinetics. Lasting joint pain relief with no surgery, no drugs, and no downtime. QC Kinetics advanced treatments harness your own body's ability to restore and repair damaged joint tissue so you can walk, run, hike, play golf, and move again pain-free. QC is under the leadership of former orthopedic surgeon Dr. Mitchell Shinecup, who is a true pioneer in regenerative medicine. Their advanced protocols have enabled tens of thousands of patients to reclaim their mobility. So stop putting it off and take action now. Live your best life again with QC Kinetics. 615-249-4024. That's 615-249-4024. Welcome back to the show. We are fueled by Hattie B's Hot Chicken. Titans on the practice field today. It's not open to the public. Well, I guess not open to the public, any of it, but it's not open to media today. We'll be back on the practice field with them tomorrow. We will have a player, it sounds like, on Thursday as a part of our Titans offseason interview series. So we will get you updated with, well, actually, I'd be open to suggestions. If you have a player that you'd like to hear from in particular that we haven't had. What are the most recent Titans player interviews that we've done? We had Boyd last week. Tyler Boyd was good. Before that, Snead and Calvin Ridley.
Yep.
Not bad. We've had some pretty good guests from the football team in the last couple of weeks. But if you have a player that you're particularly interested in, feel free to tweet us at Buck Rising, at Lucas Panzico. Well, Jackson, what's your Twitter handle?
JWillie_61.
Okay, there it is. You can tweet any of the three of us, but send your most hateful tweets to at Jackson.
JWillie61.
Yeah,
Bring me all the smoke.
That's where you can
underscore. Don't forget the underscore.
Can't forget the underscore.
The hate tweets.
Just some random guy gets my hate tweets.
Some random guy. Oh,
yeah,
you mean like Tyler Boyd?
Yeah.
Like Tyler Boyd getting Tyler Boyd's, tweets about the soccer game and having no context before signing with the Titans of who this Tyler Boyd that plays for Nashville SC is.
I'm trying to think of the last time that we had that situation with
Nashville?
In Nashville, an athlete at any one of the three professional teams having the exact same name.
People are saying Will Levis. Now, here's the thing. We're trying to work something out with Will that I think is going to be pretty unique. And we're in the infancy phases with it. So I will tell you that we will not do the conventional radio interview with the quarterback, but I'll keep you updated on what we are working on with Will Levis, because I think you're going to like it a lot more than him just jumping on the phone with us for a couple of minutes after practice. Let you know what's going on with that a little later on. Now, somebody said Harold Landry to talk about his lack of help. Well, I don't think Harold... Professor Existentialist on YouTube says Harold Landry to talk about his lack of help at edge and how he is approaching this year. So I'm assuming that if I ask Harold about his lack of help, he's not gonna treat it like he's got a lack of help there.
Yeah, it's going to be a long year. Yeah, I don't think that's what...
Harold, who famously does not love interviews, would probably not be the best icebreaker into a Harold Landry interview. But I would be curious to talk to Harold about a great many things, because he is now, ladies and gentlemen, the longest tenured Tennessee Titan, which is crazy to think about.
And I'd wonder how much of a point he makes it to help out these guys coming in. Harold, the draft pick out of Michigan, when it is a direct influence on Harold's productivity, what happens on that other edge with Arden Key and Rashad Weaver, who you could argue is one of the most important depth pieces on the Titans this year, of a guy that needs to do something, because the depth is not really there at edge rusher.
I will say that I don't normally pay that close attention to like how much different a player looks from one season to the next, but Rashad Weaver looks markedly different, and not like bigger. He looks smaller. He looks significantly leaner than he has in years past. So I don't know if that's an effort to work on his explosiveness. We haven't had the opportunity to talk to Weaver yet. And Weaver's always a pretty good interview, as a matter of fact. So I'm seeing some suggestions. I will confer with the powers that be, and I'll let you know probably tomorrow who we're going to have on the radio show. So it'll be fun. So we mentioned at the top that there's news being out there that I think Tom Pelissero would probably rephrase if he got the opportunity, but about the idea of OTAs, organized team activities, coming to an end. So Pelissero reported this morning, kind of inferring, am I saying that correctly? That OTAs would be coming to an end. End of OTAs, ? The NFL Players Association is working to finalize a proposal to overhaul the offseason starting as soon as 2025, eliminating voluntary on-field work in the spring in favor of a longer training camp ramp-up, with players reporting in mid-June to early July per sources. So, in summary, OTA's not ending, but they would just be moved later in the year to give players more of a layoff during the spring and allow them more time to rest between the actual season. Because football basically ends right now, Valentine's? Isn't the Super Bowl around Valentine? Like the end of football season.
Yes, I think the Super Bowl this year was February 12th.
Yeah, so it's and in theory, it's going to be later, if we get it, like the idea that you floated, I think maybe we talked about this off air, maybe we talked about it on air, but the idea of getting this thing out to President's Day so that Super Bowl Sunday
the Monday's off
is followed by a Monday off, which the NFL would love.
You kidding?
Love if they could turn Super Bowl Sunday into an actual holiday and grift off President's Day that way. So an 18-game regular season with 2 bye weeks would accomplish that kind of timeline. Now, OTAs are not, the movement of OTAs is not going to impact you. You who are listening within the sound of our voice or watching on Zone TV today, it's not going to impact you, right? Other than at what time you physically see videos of your favorite football players on your social media timelines doing things that look somewhat like football. The thing that it does impact, and this is not inconsequential, is something that Daniel Jeremiah points out on Twitter, which I thought was an interesting note. DJ, obviously, the head draft analyst for the NFL Network. He tweets, "This is going to suck for coaches and personnel departments. The break in the NFL calendar married up well with the end of the school year, which allowed families to have quality time together. Getting your break while school is still in session would be a bummer for obvious reasons." Now, do you care about the personal lives of your area scouts? Probably, if you're being honest, most of you are going to say no. But this is something that has to be considered because the coaches, like, there's not a union for scouts, as far as I know, in the NFL. There's not a union for coaches outright. I don't know that coaches would want necessarily a union, or all the different hurdles that would present. So right now, this is just an agreement between the Players Association and the league. What role and what influence coaches, scouts, general managers have in this matters. And I'd be curious to see how much they do to impact, how much their influence impacts what seems like a bit of an inevitability. If Tom Pelissero, the league's, I mean, he's not the lead insider for the NFL Network. I guess that's Rappaport, but Tom is very well connected. Tom's not putting this out there without the bones already being in place for something like this happening. And the players are reportedly very much in favor for it.
But surely there would be players that fall in that camp of personnel departments, coaches. Players have families too, right?
Sure.
Like players have
players
kids.
are people too. Yes,
yes. Players have
Famously,
kids.
they are human beings.
Would get to see a lot less if this program got moved out of May and into June, July. That would cut into summer vacations of players' kids too. So I know the NFLPA is the one working on finalizing this, according to Pelissero, but I imagine there are a ton of players that would be against this change. And I wonder how it would impact, like, new head coaches, right? You mentioned, okay, OTAs get to start earlier if you're a first-year head coach. You want to get guys in.
Titans' first day of practice this year was April 8th.
So, like, how valuable are those couple of months after you've had the guys in the building for a little bit? You've gotten to know guys. You've gotten them out on the practice field in some capacity. You've gotten something on tape to build off of. Then how valuable are the 2 months that follow OTAs to lead into training camp for coaches to figure out what they have and get together and talk about how they want to approach training camp based on the information they learned during OTAs? I don't know. I guess that'd be a question for Coach Mack or somebody that's coached in the league.
And Mack will be on with us Friday and certainly will run this through his prism because not only is he a former coach himself and currently employed by an NFL team, but he still talks to everybody in college and pro football that's active in these things.
I'm a little bit surprised that this is the route the Players Association is wanting to go because, it's hard to put yourself in the shoes of an NFL player, but I feel like I would want it the way it is now, personally. You get time off, then you come back, you get back in the building, you get to know your new teammates, the rookies, and then you get a break again.
You get a break.
Yeah, exactly. And it's kind of spread out a little bit as opposed to, okay, we're hitting it in June and we are not stopping until we are out of the playoffs in January or whatever it might be.
615-737-1045 is how you join the discussion. An excellent weekend if you are a Tennessee sports fan, not just the baseball team getting the #1 overall seed and having great success in Hoover, but a massive transfer for the basketball program that we'll talk about coming up next.
It is 12 o'clock. Good afternoon. I'm Lucas Panzica from the 104.5 The Zone studios. OTAs currently in progress. Titans on the field today. They will be back tomorrow with media availability. Head coach Brian Callahan scheduled to meet with the media at 12:45. Elsewhere in the NFL, in Cincinnati, wide receivers Jamar Chase and T. Higgins reportedly not present at OTAs as both are looking for new deals. College baseball regionals are set as the NCAA postseason gets underway. Tennessee, the number one overall seed after beating LSU 4-3 in the SEC Championship Sunday. Vols host Southern Miss, Indiana, and Northern Kentucky in the Knoxville Regional this weekend. Vanderbilt heads to Clemson. They will take on Clemson, Coastal Carolina, and High Point. Tonight in the NBA playoffs, the Dallas Mavericks will look to complete the sweep of the Timberwolves in the Western Conference Finals. Tip-off in Dallas at 7:30. And in the NHL, the Panthers host the Rangers in Game 4 of the Eastern Conference Finals. Rangers lead it 2-1. Puck drop at 7. Tragic news on Monday as basketball legend Bill Walton passed away due to cancer. The Hall of Famer and broadcaster was just 71. For all your foundation repairs and waterproofing needs, visit USSTN.com. Breaking news at once on your home for the Titans and Vols. This is 104.5 The Zone.
Final hours upon us on this Tuesday back. Thanks for hanging out with us. Hopefully you're not too hungover from your Memorial Day weekend. And if you're sitting around listening to us licking your wounds or procrastinating from whatever you're supposed to be doing at work on your first day back, thanks for spending a little time. Jackson, Lucas, and me, we got you for less than an hour, and then we'll turn things over to Brad Hopkins and Blaine Bishop. Great weekend on Rocky Top. We talked about the success for the baseball team in Hoover after the less than successful start against Vanderbilt to SEC tournament play. You get your redemption against Vandy. You get the victory against LSU, and you get the number one overall seed and hosting the Knoxville Regional as one of 4 teams to begin the real postseason play in college baseball. The implications of that, obviously, we'll wait to see how they play out. Any major takeaways from the way that the Vols went about winning after Vitello's decision-making with the midweek pitching staff lineup against Vanderbilt drew a fair amount of scrutiny? I saw Vanderbilt fans I saw some Vanderbilt fans out here arguing on social media that, it's not important when Vandy wins a game against Tennessee, but every time Tennessee wins a game against Vanderbilt, it's the most important win ever. And then immediately Tennessee gets the opportunity to take another crack at Vanderbilt, gets the better of them. And I see people like our colleague Will Bowling taking the victory lap on social media, understandably so. So what is the level of animosity today between Vanderbilt and Tennessee fans? Because the second game between the two of them in Hoover was inarguably the more important game, and I think some Vanderbilt fans were having a hard time coming to terms with that over the weekend.
Well, I think the biggest issue Vandy fans have taken is the idea that Tennessee fans didn't care about this SEC tournament. That it didn't matter. We just got to get our pitching figured out. Got to figure out what we have deeper into the bullpen. Who can we count on in the postseason? And there is a degree of truth to that, but I'm never going to dismiss how badly a team wants to win a tournament. Like Tennessee dogpiled in Hoover on Sunday. They were very happy to win the SEC tournament. Would have been considered a colossal failure if they had gotten eliminated from Hoover? No. And I think there are some Tennessee fans that went into the SEC tournament and said, if you were to pose a scenario and say Tennessee goes onto a path where they win the SEC tournament, their offense is fantastic, but bullpen is pretty questionable, and they have to kind of survive that, and you go into the postseason with those questions about the bullpen and an SEC tournament championship, or you find out a lot about your bullpen, you have a lot of confidence in it, but you lose in the semifinal. I think a lot of Tennessee fans would have taken the latter, and that's okay. But Tennessee goes in with 3 boxes to check, I think, and that was get A.J. Russell back. They checked that box against Vanderbilt, couple scoreless innings pitched. To learn about your bullpen and what you have deeper into that rotation, they certainly checked that box. and to win the SEC tournament. Like Tennessee went to the SEC tournament wanting to win the SEC tournament, and they did, and they checked that box about the bullpen in the SEC championship game when Dylan Loy comes in, pitches a career-high 4.5 innings, strikes out 5 in that career-high game against LSU. Marcus Phillips, before that, puts out some good stuff for Tennessee. So I think they are coming away very, very happy. And the only reason for concern, I guess, if you're a Tennessee fan, is if you believe in the number 1 overall seed curse. Of course, the number 1 seed has not won the national championship in college baseball since the late 90s. It's been 25 years. Tennessee succumbed to that curse 2 years ago when they couldn't get out of the Knoxville Super Regional against Notre Dame after having one of the best, if not the best, regular season in college baseball history. But very good weekend for Tennessee. And this is a very spicy regional setup because Southern Miss is back. You remember all that stuff with Southern Miss last year in the Hattiesburg Super Regional?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, the Applebee's and all of that stuff.
Mike Wilson starting fights on social media.
He did. But Tennessee fans were very upset that Knoxville did not get to host that Super Regional, and the whole thing was they don't even have an Applebee's. So you have that dynamic. Again, Tennessee beat Southern Miss to get to Omaha last year. Your Indiana Hoosiers, I'm sure you have been keeping up greatly with the Indiana baseball program. Buck, I'm looking forward to you breaking down their pitching rotation later on this week.
If I have to.
And the potential to face Wake Forest in the Super Regional. Of course, Chase Burns, the former Tennessee pitcher, now at Wake. And the Fighting Robert Walshes. East Carolina is in the regional opposite the Knoxville Regional as well. So a lot to this, especially in this building with your Indiana Hoosiers, with Bert's East Carolina Pirates, of course, the Tennessee Vols.
East Carolina, of course, is playing. It's really me against both you and Bert at the same time because East Carolina's first matchup in the Greenville Regional is, of course, the Evansville Purple Aces.
Oh, yes. Oh, and there's that, too.
Yes.
Wow.
So I have allegiances against both of you, which makes me very happy.
So many layers to this.
Yeah. So I'm not, do I want to take the position on Nashville Sports Talk Radio of being against the Tennessee Vols because Indiana's in the regional?
I was going to say, you have latched on to you were wearing your Villains t-shirt just a few days ago. You have latched onto the Tennessee baseball bandwagon. What do you do when they are matched up with your Hoosiers?
Because it's an interesting dichotomy, to use an SAT word, because my only allegiance really to Indiana athletics is the basketball team. I don't really care about anything else going on with Indiana sports. I don't care about the football team. You told me that track and field had great success. I'd be happy for them. Congratulations to them. Swimming and diving, I think, has been a good program for many, many years.
Have you ever been to an Indiana baseball game?
Yes, I actually have.
Okay.
Yeah. Because my junior year was Kyle Schwarber playing for the Indiana Hoosiers, and Sam Travis, who I think got drafted by the Red Sox and then was in their minor league system. I don't think he had much success as a pro. But either way, they had a really good team. There was some star power to it. Went to a lot of games because I stayed in Bloomington over the summer afterwards. So I have been to several Indiana baseball games. But, I don't know, I feel like I'm more a Tennessee athletics supporter, not named basketball. And even when the Vols basketball program's better than my basketball program, as we are getting ready to talk about with the latest transfer portal news, even though Mike Woodson has had success in the transfer portal. But, yeah, I mean, if Indiana matches up against Tennessee, I'm for sure going to go heel and go for Indiana, even if I don't know anything about Indiana. So, yeah, you can root against me, and that'll be an easy thing for the audience to further pile on me on a regular basis.
Well, that will be this weekend. Vanderbilt goes to the Clemson Regional, where they will have Clemson, Coastal Carolina, and High Point. So still time for Vanderbilt to make a run here, to make something out of this season, which I think is safe to say has been slightly underwhelming for Tim Corbin and his guys. Huge weekend in Knoxville, too, in that massive recruiting weekend in football, 865 Live, happening this weekend. Go ahead.
Well, not the football is where I was getting ready to pivot, but the basketball weekend is what I was getting ready to pivot to. But
yes, huge news
about football.
No, big recruiting weekend coming up in football. Tennessee softball gets eliminated. They won game 1 of the Super Regional against Bama, and then they lose game 2 in a game that goes 15 innings on Saturday. And then they drop game 3. They're eliminated. Bama goes to the Women's College World Series. So that was the only blemish on the Vols weekend. Yeah, Chaz Lanier is the news of the weekend for a lot of Tennessee fans last Friday.
So it's the 4th player that Tennessee has added from the transfer portal. He is I would argue he's the highest profile by a good margin. Transfer that Tennessee has had out of North Florida. He's definitely the highest ranked transfer for Tennessee, coming in at, I believe he's 8th overall, depending on where you look, whatever transfer portal rankings. I know On3 has them. I know 247 keeps track. But he commits to Tennessee on Friday and signed with the Vols on Saturday. And he brings up the caliber of transfer class that Rick Barnes is going to be able to add. Now, obviously, Nashville native. That's always exciting.
Ensworth.
Average 19, almost 20 points per game, 4.8 rebounds, 1.8 assists in just over 33 minutes per game last year. Shot 51% from the field and 44% from three, which is, of course, what you need to know. Rick Barnes on him, quote, "As soon as Chaz entered the transfer portal, we identified him as someone we would love to bring home to the Volunteer State. Our fan base will love his character, humility, and work ethic, as well as his strong basketball IQ." Chaz Lanier, can Chaz Lanier be, because he's a better caliber player in the transfer portal than Dalton Knecht was. Now, what Dalton Knecht played himself into is arguably a first-round pick in the NBA draft that will soon be upon us. So I guess the way that I've looked at the transfer portal stuff since Knecht is you couldn't have predicted Knecht's ascent. So to try and replace him is a bit of a fallacy, because you're not going to find any one player that's going to do it. But if you had to pick one player that could be capable of replacing that kind of production from Dalton Knecht, Lanier's a great one, because you have Felix Akpara, I believe is how I pronounce it, Darlin Stone, Dubar, Igor Milicic.
Milicic out of Charlotte, the big man.
So that is the current transfer portal class. But Chaz Lanier makes me feel significantly better about the production lost and what Tennessee did lose, of course, in the transfer portal itself, coming in to play at the Food City Center.
Well, just the tool now that Dalton Knecht can be for Rick Barnes. Like Tennessee was up against, it looked like at the end.
In the portal, you mean?
In the portal. BYU, Kentucky, and Tennessee were the finalists for Lanier services. Now, BYU, there was NIL involved across the board there, but for Kentucky, obviously, that was kind of a missing piece for Kentucky that they need to bring in. One more high-profile scorer like Chaz Lanier. I'm sure the NIL money was there to join that storied program, but Tennessee has the foundation of a coach that's not in his first year, like at Kentucky or at BYU. The NIL opportunities are there, and the blueprint is there for a high-profile, mid-major transfer to come in who is already an accomplished scorer with great shooting numbers. Lanier, a 51% shooter last year, 40% three-point shooter, with the goal of, after he went through the draft process, he's heard a lot about what he needs to do and improve on defensively. Like Dalton Knecht, that's why Chaz Lanier is coming to Tennessee. So that blueprint is just a massive tool for Rick Barnes. Chaz. Now he just sounds like a California, silver spoon kid. But so he comes in and caps off a class of Tennessee addressed the front court with Milicic and Okpara, both 6'10", 6'11 type of guys. Shot blockers. Milicic can step out and shoot the three. Darlin Stone Dubar can come in as a lengthy 6'8 scorer out of Hofstra. And then that core of Zakai Ziegler, Jemai Meshack, Cam Carr, JP Estrella, Jordan Gainey. So it's a deep squad again, and Rick Barnes is going to have to mix and match. And there's going to be guys that carried over from last year that believe they should have a starting spot. And there's going to be a lot of competition in there. I don't know how much Lanier lives up to Dalton Knecht, but even just to have that blueprint of what Knecht did last year, and he will be a first-round pick most likely, so massive for Tennessee. And I think the appeal of coming home was big for Lanier too.
We'll pivot back to the NFL because a ton of wide receivers have gotten paid this offseason, including the Tennessee Titans paying Calvin Ridley. So how have the Titans been one of the most influential teams on not just the current NFL wide receiver market, but what it stands to be in the future? We'll tell you how coming up next. Welcome back to the show. Fueled by Hattie B's Hot Chicken. I mentioned that the wide receiver market, Tennessee Titans have had an impact on it. Not just this offseason by giving Calvin Ridley a 4-year, $92 million deal. Not just last offseason by beating out the New England Patriots for the services of DeAndre Hopkins and giving him a fair amount of money as a part of that. More money than it seemed a lot of teams were willing to give DeAndre Hopkins at the time. But we enter another offseason, or we've been through another offseason where wide receivers again get paid. Lucas, can you tell me how many wide receivers were drafted last month? Drafted, not UDFAs, but how many of, let's say, how many picks are there? There are 260 in the NFL, maybe
256.
256 is
more
relevant.
with comp picks, I guess.
Yeah, so let's say ballpark 250 plus. How many wide receivers specifically were drafted?
At the risk of sounding like a complete idiot, I will say 24.
35.
Okay.
9 of the 35 were in the first 34 picks. So wide receivers have never been more plentiful, you could argue. We're talking about a draft class that is as talented top to bottom as, maybe deep top to bottom, maybe not outright talent to top to bottom, as any wide receiver class that we've seen. And the question becomes, as Justin Jefferson gets ready to get paid, as Jamar Chase gets ready to get paid, are we on the verge of a wide receiver market bubble? So this is something that Mike Florio posed on Pro Football Talk a couple of days ago. And his argument is that there are signs, not that it's a guarantee, but there are signs that the receiver market could be heading the same direction as running back, off-ball linebacker, and safety. 3 positions that have seen a significant depreciation in what their value is, but none more so than the running back. Florio's argument is where the draftable players, the cheaper players, have never been more ready to go, or I think the word that he used was competent. How much is that going to impact the level of competency that you are going to overpay for on the NFL wide receiver free agent market, as opposed to just doing what 3 teams in 2022 did, the Titans among them, which is say, no, we're not going to pay A.J. Brown $25 million a year. We're going to trade him. We're going to get what we can. We're going to save that money because we're already cap strapped. And we're going to just find his replacement with the 18th overall pick. Now, the Titans are a hideous example because there is no worse. Well, I don't know. The Chiefs did not suffer the way that the Titans did by trading away Tyreek Hill.
Find the example of someone that did it well and someone that did it poorly. The Titans did it very poorly. The Chiefs did it very well. They also have Patrick Mahomes.
And that is the only reason that you could argue that the Chiefs did it well, because if MVS was playing for any other quarterback and dropping balls at the rate that he was in Kadarius Toney, then you would look around and being like, the Chiefs are idiots for trading away Tyreek Hill.
I think you have to bring up the Vikings in this as well.
Mm-hmm. Which is why we're getting into this discussion, because Jefferson and Chase are both on the doorstep of getting this paid. But the
replacement of Stephon Diggs was Justin Jefferson, right? And that worked out pretty nicely for the Vikings, but now they're facing a similar situation.
So, Treylon Burks seems like them, and there's been a lot. I think, as a show, can we agree that we have Treylon Burks fatigue? And it's not about Treylon. It's just about the dialogue around Treylon. Like, I have Treylon Burks talking fatigue, but he is, it seems, one of the exceptions as opposed to the rule, because this has paid dividends for a fair amount of teams that have traded wide receivers. Titans traded A.J. Brown. That went poorly. The Packers didn't trade Devontae Adams, did they? He was a free agent while they were waiting for Aaron Rodgers' situation to play itself out. Because there's a part of me that says that was a part of a trade, but I think Adams was just out there.
He was traded.
He was traded.
Yeah,
okay.
It was in exchange for their 2022 first-round pick, which was used to select Quay Walker, and a second-round pick.
So, traded because Aaron Rodgers is going to cost you all kinds of money, and you waited too long to do the Davante Adams deal, so you're looking to get back value, and that has worked out because Romeo Doubs is a good player. Christian Watson is a good player. They have I don't know how to pronounce the Samari dude's name. Is it Samari Toure? Either way, they have players that don't make up for Davante Adams being a Las Vegas Raider. But would you not say that the Packers have found a way to put together a competent wide receiver core in the absence of Davante Adams? Yes, people would obviously look at the Packers and say that they're a very young team, but definitely that's a group of skilled talent that's ascending. Vikings, Justin Jefferson, Niners, Brandon Ayuk, and T. Higgins more than Jamar Chase, because I think it sounds like, and Jamar Chase isn't, I don't think he might be eligible for a contract. Either way, CeeDee Lamb is also kind of on the precipice of being one of these players because the Cowboys are in a bit of hell. Cowboys make a lot of sense to move CeeDee Lamb, dealing with Dak Prescott's contract. The Niners make a lot of sense to move Brandon Ayuk because they drafted a first-round wide receiver in Ricky Pearsall, and their skill talent has enough receiving talent without being outright receivers to make up for maybe moving Brandon Ayuk, even if he is outright their best receiver. Justin Jefferson is the interesting one here because do you feel like the Vikings are in a position post-draft to move on as seamlessly from, I think Justin Jefferson's the best wide receiver going right now.
I mean, here's the thing. The Vikings traded away traded away Stephon Diggs and then drafted Justin Jefferson, right? Like the Packers traded away Davante Adams and then built this young wide receiver core. Draft is now in the rear view. So if you don't have that solution in-house at the moment, and what are we looking at with the Vikings wide receiver room? Jordan Addison, first-round pick, and who else at the moment surrounding J.J. McCarthy? I think you got to pay Justin Jefferson. I mean, the Detroit Lions had to pay Amon-Ra St. Brown. I think the Minnesota Vikings got to pay Justin Jefferson.
Yeah, this is what their receiving core looks like right now, outside of Justin Jefferson. Addison, like you said, they've got Brandon Powell, who I want to say was an unrestricted free agent from the Rams. And N'Keal Harry is there after being with the Bears for a little bit. And then you've got like dudes like Trent Sherfield who have been journeymen.
TJ Hawkinson, a part of that pass-catching core.
That matters, but he's dealt with injury. So TJ Hawkinson is not outright the most available player, let's say, at least in his time with the Vikings. So the Vikings are probably the example of the player that you pay, but, and not to relitigate the AJ thing, the Titans were the example of pay the player, and they famously didn't. Nobody could have foreseen how poorly it went in the aftermath of AJ. Because I think there was a fair amount of Titans fans. I doubt it was a majority. There's a fair amount of Titans fans that were done with AJ. He's not available. He's not playing enough. He's a bit of a headache on social media. So, they hit him with the diva wide receiver thing, and they said, let him be somebody else's problem. Then he goes to a Super Bowl with Philadelphia. Hadn't won a Super Bowl, but has still made it further in the postseason than he did with the Titans on a better team.
What were the other? So you listed running back, safety, and off-ball linebacker as examples of positions that this has kind of already happened to, right? Like the crash, so to speak, of their markets, right?
Yes.
Those are the three main examples. So
the thing, and I wonder how this hits you guys, because the thing that sticks out the most to me about where the running back market kind of shifted was Lev Bell. Lev Bell's holdout really, and it wasn't really a holdout because he ended up taking less money than the Steelers initially offered him to go to the Jets, I want to say with Adam Gase at the time. But Le'Veon Bell is kind of the poster child to me of where the running back logic started to shift. Guy still got paid because he got paid afterwards. McCaffrey got paid, and that contract looked terrible until he went to San Francisco. Derek got paid, but he got paid less. And the COVID year in the middle of the contract negotiation for Derek kind of stuck out there. But Le'Veon Bell's holdout seemed to me like one of the most all right, did we really need the running back that badly? No, probably not. We'll just find another one.
Yeah, but that has also coincided with the running back position not meaning as much in the modern game, right? Same with off-ball linebacker. Like, as the NFL has gotten less and less run heavy, the off-ball linebacker's impact on the defense has been a little bit minimized compared to what it was in the Mike Singletary days, right? So that's the difference here, in that the wide receivers value, the positional value, isn't going anywhere. If anything, it just keeps going up.
Well, I think there's one way that I look at it that makes the most sense, which is that the top of market players will still get paid. Justin Jefferson, Tyreek Hill will still get paid. The impact to me will be more interesting on the Calvin Ridley tier of NFL wide receivers. There are a lot of people league-wide that would argue that Tennessee paid too much for Calvin Ridley, because Calvin Ridley is a good wide receiver. He has certainly been at times, many times throughout the course of his career, an above average wide receiver, but he's definitely like a second tier. You would list, I would argue, 15 to 20 names before you got to Calvin. Maybe not that many, but let's say somewhere between 10 to 15 names before you got to Calvin Ridley of wide receivers. That's kind of where, at least my initial reaction to this discussion, best players at every position are still going to get paid. But do you still have to shell out that kind of money for the second tier guys? And I think that's already reflected in what we saw here in Tennessee. Tyler Boyd, I still can't believe that they're getting him. I'm having reverse sticker shock that he's under contract for 1 year up to $4 million and change.
And he's the youngest of the three, of Ridley and Hopkins,
which is crazy.
So you're saying not so much that we're going to get away from the receivers when they get to age 25 and that second contract is due, not getting away from those inflated numbers, but more so the 30-year-old receivers getting $90 million on a 4-year contract with their third team or whoever.
Kind of, but I think the pool will shrink. Like, of those 25-year-old receivers that are set to get paid, because we do this now with quarterbacks, right? The next quarterback up to get paid is going to be either the highest paid quarterback or the second highest paid quarterback, or ballpark, right? They're all going to make somewhere in the area of $45 to $55 million on an average annual basis in today's current quarterback market. I think the pool on receivers is going to shrink because there's way more receivers than there are quarterbacks. So you will still have, it's almost like not to make this a socioeconomic conversation, but rich people in America have never been richer than they are right now. There's never been a bigger wealth gap in American society than there is in the modern day. I think the wealth gap between the wide receivers is going to grow from the top 1% to the upper middle class of wide receiver contracts. And Ridley kind of strikes me as an example. Ridley and Boyd strike me as two different kinds of examples of that. Running back is, we're never going to see it depreciate the way that the running back contracts have actively gone down over the course of the last couple of years. And the salary cap spike this year helped running backs considerably, including Derrick Henry. But yeah, I don't think it's a one-to-one parallel, but I understand the argument that he's trying to make.
But teams will have the decision, okay, would you rather have a Calvin Ridley, he's 29, right? He's about to be 30.
Yep.
And give him that 4-year, $92 million contract, whatever it was? Or would you rather draft a Rome Odunze, right? And address it that way with the value of a high upside prospect that you don't have to pay that kind of money for 4 years or so?
Well, the answer is, what kind of team are you? Are you the Tennessee Titans with the 4th or 5th most cap space to spend heading into the offseason, and it doesn't hurt you outright? In fact, it only helps you to add Calvin Ridley to that room.
When you have a large need at left tackle that can be addressed in that top 10.
And you don't have to move people's money around the way that you did with Julio. So I think for teams at the top end of the quote-unquote contender scale, Baltimore, Kansas City, you just saw Buffalo do it, right? With the shedding of contracts, in particular Diggs and moving him. So we have seen both examples of that. Wide receivers getting moved because your contract situation is untenable, and wide receivers getting paid because it is still a premium position in the NFL, even if it is arguably the most dependent position in the NFL on another position group.
So of the guys that are due a contract, like, let's work through them. we looked at the Vikings receiver room. They probably need Justin Jefferson back in that team next year.
I would agree.
If they want to be meaningfully competitive.
I've got our lads up in front of me so we can do this with the depth chart.
Well, same goes with Jamar Chase, right? It wouldn't do the Bengals any good to deal Jamar Chase right now. When you have T. Higgins facing a similar situation, he's been tagged. He has not signed the tender, and you're down Tyler Boyd. Like, the Bengals receiver room, to be honest, has never been all that deep in these last 4 years.
No,
it's been
not depth.
very heavily relying on Chase, Higgins, Boyd, that trio. And the numbers play out that way.
And a part of that dip for the Bengals hasn't just been Burrow. Higgins missed a good amount of time.
Oh, yeah. Last year, Higgins, and whether it was performance or availability, Higgins did not have a great 2023. Okay, so Brandon Ayuk probably is the prime example here of a team that could afford to take him off the books and maybe still have their head above the water in that position because they drafted Ricky Pearsall. So now you're looking at a core of Ricky Pearsall, Deebo Samuel, Jawan Jennings, George Kittle as a pass catcher. Is Brandon Ayuk desperately needed in that offense? Like, it can be debated, but if you're the 49ers, do you like Ricky Pearsall enough? I mean, you got him in the first round.
Which is and this is why pre-draft discussion is so meaningless, because nobody had Ricky Pearsall as a first-round pick. Maybe a fringe first-round pick.
But like, what about the Cowboys and CeeDee? I mean, who is there in that wide receiver room if you were to deal CeeDee Lamb because you don't want to pay him the contract that he is owed after being one of the top receivers in the NFL the last few years, breaking all sorts of Michael Irvin records last year? Who are you going to rely on if you're Dallas and you're saying you're all in 2024 if you get rid of CeeDee Lamb because you don't want to pay him because you don't have the money?
Brandon Cooks is
he's still going.
Buddy, you would be look up how old Brandon Cooks is right now. I bet it'll shock you because he's played for a couple of different teams at this point. But their depth chart right now is Jalen Tolbert, Brandon Cooks, CeeDee Lamb.
I would have said he's at least like 33. Brandon Cooks.
How old is he?
30.
Yeah. And I'm honestly surprised he's that old. But they have, so Jalen Tolbert, Brandon Cooks, and CeeDee Lamb are the Cowboys' starting 3 wide receivers. But Lucas, they're in a weird position because they don't have the cap space without moving the money and putting themselves in let's just say a 2021 Titan situation where you do the Julio thing, but it makes Tannehill's contract an albatross for the 2 years after the fact until you can cleanly get out from under it.
Brandon Cooks has had a 1,000-yard receiving season with 4 different franchises. Yep. Saints, Patriots, Rams, Texans. I wonder what the NFL record is for a receiver to have a 1,000-yard season with the most teams, if that makes sense. I'd be fascinated to know what that NFL record is and how close Brandon Cooks is to it.
615-737-1045 is the number. Last call for phone calls if you got them. Lucas wanted to...
He does hold that record. He's tied with Brandon Marshall.
Does he really?
Yes. Brandon Marshall also had 1,000-yard seasons with 4 different teams. He and Brandon Cooks are the only ones to do that. Cooks is also the first player in NFL history with a 1,000-yard receiving season in 3 consecutive seasons with 3 different teams. Man, it's just bouncing around, cranking out 1,000 yards from New Orleans to New England to Los Angeles.
Because New Orleans was the team that drafted him, right?
Correct. Yeah, his first 3 years were in New Orleans.
And just think about we talk about Brandon Marshall in such a different context as we do Brandon Cooks, for example, even though, they're as statistically viable as one another. Anyway, Pittman, or not Pittman. I saw Pittman in the chat, but difference in personalities, for sure. Last call for phone calls. Lucas wouldn't let me remember Bill Walton. He wanted to talk about a guard instead, so we'll do that coming up next. So we've been playing Grateful Dead all day because one of the most famous deadheads among us passed after a battle with cancer that I don't think that many people, at least publicly, knew about in Bill Walton.
It was not very public.
He is I think he's probably the biggest, outside of like the band members, the surviving band members of the Grateful Dead. I don't know that there's a bigger national representative of deadheads anywhere in the public space than Bill Walton.
John Mayer's pretty up there with the way he tours with them in Dead & Company. But yeah, absolutely. Bill Walton, I mean, just embodied Grateful Dead. It was so much ingrained into his personality, and the way that he spilled it out into his broadcasting made him one of the most entertaining broadcasters alive.
Quote, I love my bike, I love San Diego, and I love solar power. And him and Dave Pasch, the play-by-play guy that he did so many of his games with on ESPN, obviously, you know, college basketball player at UCLA during the height of UCLA, on the Boston Celtics team, an NBA Hall of Famer. Like, his basketball career is many of you remember Bill Walton for different things. For me, Bill Walton has always been a broadcaster in my life. And dude, just from a personal perspective, because I think that's just the best way to speak on these things if you don't have actual knowledge of who they were before they were the person that you remember them as. I feel like Bill Walton is one of the people most responsible for making me love sports. Or getting me to love sports. Because there's nobody like him who is anywhere close to Bill Walton, as just in terms of, like, you turn on a game and you have no idea what he's going to be talking about, other than it's probably going to involve a bike and probably some Grateful Dead references, but that almost the minority of what is coming out of his mouth is basketball related. Because Bill Walton is kind of like the prototype for simulcasts, right? Except he's on a main broadcast, and I know it drove a lot of people crazy. I remember the first radio station that I worked in town, the host that I work with could not stand Bill Walton because he just wanted to hear about the basketball game. Just wants to hear about the basketball.
And a lot of people had that opinion.
For sure. But for me, like, I'm there to be entertained. And nobody made me feel as good about what's going on, besides there's a basketball game on, than Bill Walton. He was on my bucket list of interviews. If we ever got the opportunity to talk to anybody on the radio show, Bill Walton, top tier, because we'd say 2 words and he'd talk for the rest of the time.
And the way he would weave in the analysis as well.
Oh, yeah.
So Dave Pasch would make a call, and you had no idea if what Walton said next was going to be analysis of the play, which it very well could be, or a continuation of, like, the serpentine rainbow dragons he was talking about in the prior stretch of Dead Ball or whatever. It was just amazing. Yeah, and so surprising. Did you know that he was?
I didn't know he was sick.
I didn't know he was sick.
I had no idea.
I had no clue. The stories that have come out from it have been so awesome. Dave Pasch is tweeting a bunch of stuff. There's a quick one from Reese Davis where he talks about Bill Walton was having a speaking engagement near the town Reese grew up in, which is Muscle Shoals, Alabama, not far from here. And he was talking to Bill on the phone for an hour or so because Bill wanted to know some things about the area. And then after they hung up, Bill called Reese back and asked for the address of the house Reese grew up in. Reese had no idea why he wanted it, but a couple of weeks later, he got a picture of Bill Walton standing in front of the house Reese Davis grew up in with a jar of dirt from the front yard in his hand. And he said he was going to mix it with the dirt at his house in San Diego. And Reese Davis posts a picture of Bill just with the peace sign in one hand and then holding the jar of dirt in the other hand in front of this house. Just little things like that, like nobody, it's just little interactions that Bill had with colleagues and friends. And it's just who he was.
It's just so rare, and I know we're running into polls, but, Bill Walton's important enough. It's just so rare that you meet a truly unique person, Like, you meet a lot of people who are different, and all of us are individual in our own respects. But I can't think of another person in my life, in public life, that hits the same way or hits the same notes in any kind of a way that Bill Walton did. And so I'll remember him for that forever and just appreciate him and his family for letting him be a part of all of our lives for as long as he was. And Dave Pasch for being, how many, I wonder how many play-by-play broadcasters didn't like working with him. Because I'm sure, I mean, you're a play-by-play guy. How big of a nightmare would that have been to drive around whilst actually trying to call the action of a basketball game?
It had to be a privilege and a massive challenge, too, because you have no idea when to talk.
A privilege and a burden.
No idea where he's going to go. But I would think you would have to understand just who you were sharing a broadcast with, that you are anything but the star of the show. And Bill Walton would not take the moment away from teams, too. I think he knew what he was doing. He would pick his spots in a great way. And Rick Carlisle, did you see what Rick Carlisle said? He had like a 4-minute little thing with media before Game 4 the other day. And I guess I'll just paraphrase it, but he kind of capped it with a great quote that said, Bill Walton relentlessly competed to make every single moment in life as good as it possibly could be.
Sure.
That's not the exact word. He defiantly competed for every moment in life for it to be the greatest it could be. That was the quote from Rick Carlisle. Yeah, so I thought that really summed it up.
All right. We probably don't. You want to do rapid fire polls?
Rapid fire polls.
Let's go.
Oh.
Why are you discussing with Borat? What happened? Lucas is so upset that we played Borat after eulogizing Bill Walton.
I don't know what poll is appropriate after we mourn somebody's death.
I think he would have been down for Borat. I think so.
Presented by Two Rivers Ford, the South's most trusted Ford dealer. Tennessee fans, what's your level of BVS about the #1 overall seed curse in college baseball? Karen gives it a 12. I'm not sure what scale that's at. But Tyrone says, I hate it. David says he is cautiously, very cautiously optimistic. Hey, that curse has to be broken at some point, right? 25 years feels like a good time to break it. Would you care if OTAs got moved closer to training camp? 89% say nah.
Nah, it doesn't affect
Don't care. Yep. Which NFL position
It's just Lucas
group?
and I looking and be like, oh, really?
It really is just the people that are involved. What made you say, oh no, in sports this weekend? Jim says NASCAR cutting one of their crown jewels in half and having fans post pics of a dry track an hour later. Oh, I didn't see this.
What is this?
That the race over the weekend was called off, I guess, due to weather, and then things dried up and They could have raced if they had just delayed. I'm not sure all the details.
Okay.
Goody says Acuna tearing his ACL, just awful. A lot of people are saying Ronald Acuna tearing his ACL.
So.
Those are the polls.
That's the show. We appreciate you guys spending your afternoon with us. Welcome back. If you were on vacation, and if you're still on vacation, lucky you. We'll be back with you tomorrow. Titans on the practice field. There'll be press conferences. There'll be players. There'll be all kind of good stuff, including Brad Hopkins and Blaine Bishop, because they're next.
It is lunchtime, at least for me. You may not be on your lunch break